Good afternoon and most welcome to 1148 of the Heidegger series. And I would today look into a book by Erin O'Connor, Heraclitus and Derrida. I will put it into the description. It looks like this. And I start with the second chapter that is called A Critique of Human Reasoning. Of course, this is a parody of Hume, a critique of human reasoning by Hume. I will start with the sites, and I don't know if I spell it correctly. I try to imitate what's written here. Tinte, isin, geran, noson, elegeka, tin.
Okay. Those accents. I don't know, is it so? Also, and then 5, then what else say this like? Okay, so we have the translation that
Thinking, it's very good. Thinking is an instant of the sacred disease, and sight is deceptive. And this is very typical for the, in modern eyes, contradictory Heraclitus. Now we previously went through rather a lot of Charles H. Kahn, a marvelous interpreter of Heraclitus, a man who means that our vision today, our eye, is clouded, and therefore most of what Heraclitus wrote is going to be either mistranslated, misjudged, or just by reading it, and this might be the most important, just by reading it as it is, we are doomed to fall into the trap of modernity. And of course, reading Kahn, one starts to understand that a great philosopher got lost in history because of the development he himself might have prophetically gathered or understood its coming. The doom of not understanding. Heraclitus wants us to understand once more, and this is from the second chapter, page 17 of the book. Nice little booklet, not too thick. It looks innocent enough, but I can tell you it's not really that innocent. So be aware. The next site could be helpful, and I know a lot about that myself. There is a greater need to extinguish hybris than there is a blazing fire. Heraclitus is clearly very interested in the conditions under which human beings produce knowledge, and mounts a significant critique of what he sees as the predominant modes of reasoning which determine conventional accounts of the universal logos. In the fragments that make his position on this subject most clear, Heraclitus provides an account of human ways of knowing, in which he delineates at least 3 negative aspects of the epistemological condition, and these are presented with varying degrees of confidence in the possibility of improvement or change. He makes the following assertions: that human thinking about the nature of cosmos is always mistaken, even though common human experience of the cosmic logos is sufficient for accurate knowledge that there are irrational forces within the process of human cognition which influence conventional structures of human understanding, and that the human apparatus for perceiving and comprehending the world is necessarily and irreducibly conditioned by its particular subjective ways of knowing. In a group of thematically linked texts, Heraclitus advances this claim that any organizing principle ascribed to the cosmos, whether it is the sort of critique or the sort he proposes, is irreducibly bound to the conditions and scope of human ways of knowing. In particular, he explores the ways in which linguistic practice and structure inform both rational and cosmological paradigms. This particular exposition leads him to claim a strong link between the ability to think well and one's command of language. The central importance of the relationship between language and understanding is evident in the longest extant quote from Heraclitus's book, where he argues that most people are mistaken in their understanding of the logos. Of this account, which is the case, always human beings do not comprehend before they hear it, or even having heard it for the first time. For with all things becoming according to this account, they are like the inexperienced. When they are experiencing these words and deeds, such as I go through, distinguishing each according to its nature and saying how it is, whether they do, while awake, escape the notice of other human beings, just as they forget what they do when sleeping. How very true. This passage presents a good example of some of the central tenets held by Heraclitus regarding the cosmic logos, it is eternal, and human understanding of it, which is deeply flawed. He also characterized the form of his own philosophical contribution. Announcing it as a discourse in which he describes in detail the nature of his own words and deeds, as well as presumably the deeds of the cosmic logos. In the following discussion, a poetic and etymological analysis reveals that even in this passage, which is uncharacteristically direct, the meaning is charged with linguistic density and elusiveness. The poetic subtleties of his propositions and elsewhere suggest that his own account must be read very, very careful. Our interpretation is dependent upon our appreciation of the care with which his words have been composed. Thoughtful attention to the imagery contained in the direction and its etymological resources illuminates and clarifies the strong continuity of argument and thought in the fragmentary discourse of Heraclitus. Inasmuch as the modern term logocentrism describes what has come to be regarded as a fundamental organizing principle of the Western tradition of rational philosophy and knowledge, it is instructive to examine the use of the word logos in archaic and classical Greek contexts, as well as its ambiguous appearance in the aforementioned paragraph. There are 10 occurrences of logos in the extant fragments of Heraclitus, and the thematic subject of logos resonate in cognate words occurring elsewhere in the fragments. The word has a wide range of possible translations, but was commonly used in Ionic prose to refer to one's own word, language, rapport, or discourse. In a more abstract metaphysical sense, logos was also used by the Presocratic philosophers to refer to the organizing principles of the universal cosmos as described in their own version of Periphysios. Historically, most interpreters of the fragment have chosen one reading of logos to the exclusion of the other. Very common. But modern interpreters typically agree that both readings of logos are implied in Heraclitus's statement that human beings neither understand his account of the cosmic order nor the experience of the cosmic order in itself. In the previous fragment, logos refers both to his particular account that follows and to the account or principle of the cosmic order itself. What he calls elsewhere tousophon, a substantive adjective describing the wise, the learned, or the wisdom about the nature of the cosmos. Kant's translation of the first line captures the double application of the term. Quote from Kant, "Although this account holds forever, man ever failed to comprehend, both before hearing it and once they have heard it. It becomes clear in examining the rest of his statements that for Heraclitus, the two definitions of logos are related. The topic of his discourse concerns the structure of the cosmic logos itself and how human beings account for it. neither of the two meanings that resonate in his use of logos cancels the other. We do not have to choose one usage over the other. Both can function, and indeed both do function in the meaning of his expression. At the same time that he criticizes people for failing to comprehend both the natural order of things and his own discourse on it. His ambiguous deployment of the word logos in this opening sentence not only brings attention to the assumption that there is a difference between the actual order of things and any semantic articulation of that order, but also suggests an impasse between the two. The proem announces that the problem of understanding is complex and manifold. I have a proposal here, and I will take a side from Ludwig Wittgenstein. Wovon man nicht sprechen kann, darüber muss man schweigen. And what he means by that is showed in this illustration. There is a before, and after we have an as structure, and in this as structures contradictions are established naturally, because that is what an as structure is. It sees one aspect. So if you see one aspect of this book, I see another one, and voila, you have a contradiction. Therefore, it is important, according to Wittgenstein, to understand that there is a before. This before, as I said in German, is not something we can speak about, but we can still infer it. But if we stick to this and sort of found that as a reality, make that ontological, then we will have covered our eyes, ears, and sight. We will be blinded to the order of cosmos. Because all of a sudden, here, we only have one part. The before is the more expansive, the logos. That's my take on it. The wide range of meanings attributed to logos supplies a host of linguistic and epistemological assumptions and paradigms, starting with the initial definition of logos as a word, that by which an inward thought is expressed, which admits an act of translation, and its subsequent usage to denote additionally a narrative or history, the power and necessity of language to give form to thought, to shape the discourse of knowledge, and to create the understanding of the nature of reality is acknowledged. Some uses of logos are translated in ways that indicate a fragile relation to the notion of objective truth, as in the texts of Herodotus. We also find logos translated as promise, revealing another clear indication of the word's potential tenuousness. In the traditional translations of Herodotus, additional usage of logos as proportion or analogy, the difference between a word and the entity it signifies, is called to our attention. In Plato, however, logos is often translated as definition, and is often understood to mean thought or reason. Despite a considerable and seemingly contradictory range of meanings, logos is also the word used to represent the thing spoken of, the subject or matter of the logos. In this latter case, the word functions as both word and referent, signifier and signified, with the implied understanding that there is a logos or account of cosmic order, which exists independently and which is available to human comprehension directly and without lexical mediation. It is the nature of this unmediated comprehension that Heraclitus call into question, and this point of view distinguish him sharply from other pre-Socratic philosophers. Emphasizing the historical context of Heraclitus's use of the term and reflecting the modern attention to discursive practice, Kahn defines the Heraclitean usage of logos as referring to the eternal structure of the world as it man itself in discourse. Similarly, in an essay of Heraclitus's fragment D50, Heidegger performs an etymological analysis of the term logos and demonstrates the way in which the term implicates the linguistic aspect of knowledge and understanding. Listen not to me, but to the logos. It is wise to agree that all things are one. Heidegger translates and interprets logos not only as a saying aloud, but according to the primary meaning for its etymological source in the verb legein, to lay, to bring together, to gather or collect. In analyzing how the predominant meaning of legein has come from to lay or together to mean saying and talking, Heidegger writes that we have stumbled upon an event whose immensity still lies concealed in its long, unnoticed simplicity. Heidegger argues that these definitions fail to mediate on the essential origin of reason. Since Heraclitus' concern with etymology is well documented, close considerations of Heidegger's analysis is worthwhile, as he traces the definitions and epistemological implications of the verb legein. Heidegger proposes the following sequence of relations based on the physical and visual aspects of the practical acts of laying and gathering. To lay is at the same time to place one thing beside another, to lay them together. To lay is to gather. But gathering is more than the mere amassing. To gathering belongs a collecting which brings under shelter. Accommodation governs the sheltering. Accommodation is in turn governed by safekeeping. End of quote. The visual, structural, and human-centered aspects of this verb are here made explicit. The acts of distinguishing, separating, and collecting from a larger number of things, then protecting what has been collected, describes not only the more concrete, primal human experience of hunting and gathering in order to survive in the world, but also the action of making sense and producing knowledge, which also enables and improves survival in the world. It is important to ask, what is a collected thing being removed or protected from? Considering the relation of the human being to act of legain, Heidegger writes, sorry for my scrubby voice. Then what does to lay mean? Laying brings to lie, in that it lets things lie together before us. All too readily we take this letting in the sense of omitting or letting go. However, legain, to lay, by its letting, lying together before, means just this, that whatever lies before us involves us and therefore concerns us. Laying as letting lie together before is concerned with retaining whatever is laid down as laying before them. It's all down to the hand, the doing, the action, the verb. I also think of Barbara, what's her name now?
Stravinsky, no? I can't take it out.
Tversky.
Tversky, yes.
She shows that highly intelligent people uses their hand in a more precise manner. And they always use their hands when it comes to advanced thinking. Of course, only when they are not aware they're being spied on. That is pretty amazing. It has its origin, and that origin does not make thinking base or low. I don't think Heidegger would say that. Definitely it wouldn't be a word of Heraclitus. It is just the contrary. This is how we develop thinking, by making it real, bodily, of this world. Otherwise, it will be empty. Heidegger's idea of human involvement and concern with retaining asserts, this is important, human subjectivity and desire in the act of gathering. While logos in its abstract sense may refer to the overall structure of the cosmos, etymological analysis of its roots points to the human role in creating the content and discourse of the logos, as Heidegger has shown. To lay one thing beside another, bring it into protection, is literally to delimit and define. Or in Heidegger's term, to secure or shelter in unconcealment. In the light of this etymology, we understand the origin of a logos from a variety of possible choices. Certain elements, events, or concepts are selected and separated from others, and boundaries are determined. This process takes place whether consciously recognized or not. It is simply the inevitable and necessary cognitive process. By virtue of this constructed containment and isolation from other elements, this lexical grouping is authorized by an agreement that such an account is likely, useful, and seemingly correct. Or simply, what is more or most pleasing. In this way, a human creation becomes a definition that is authorized as orthodox, with respect to Heraclitus's assertion that nature loves to hide. We can see how this concept and translation of logos, with the etymological resonance of its root legein, allows one to bring nature in general and in particular out of hiding and into unconcealment, i.e., a pattern of nature is found or seen, and it is brought into language, or what Heidegger calls presence. While Heidegger does not apply his etymological analysis critically to the subject of epistemology, but rather to the translation of Heraclitus's diction, his discussion is illuminating concerning the Heraclitean logos of knowledge. That legein is laying wherein saying and talking articulate their essence, refers to the earliest and most consequential decision concerning the essence of language. To say is legein. This sentence names the inexhaustible mystery that, speaking of language, comes to pass from the unconcealment of what is present, and is determined according to the lying before what is present, as the letting lie together before. Mediated by language, unconcealment is understood to take place through discourse. That which is understood as present but concealed becomes available for human discovery or understanding through the act of articulating what has been separated out and contained. That is, through the creation of linguistic definitions. In accordance with the etymological association of logos, what Heidegger calls the essential origin of reason can be understood as a subjective human creation. Subjective human creation, conditioned by the linguistic system of signification. Heraclitus's double meaning for logos, as well as the careful diction throughout the fragment, reveals his own awareness of problems inherent in the production of knowledge. Rather than revealing objective, transcendental, metaphysical truth, any concept of the logos will necessarily reflect the method and tools used in articulating philosophical thought, which is portrayed throughout Heraclitus's texts as subjective, idiosyncratic, and essentially poetic. Heraclitus's statement in the fragment about the inadequate understanding of the cosmic logos comes emphatically at the beginning of his book and is repeated in a sizable group of thematically related fragments, making it clear that one of Heraclitus's chief concerns is the human condition of ignorance about the cosmic structure of reality. It is important to note that he is more preoccupied at the outside with establishing this view of human ignorance than with providing an argument about the structure of the cosmic logos itself. His subject then, unlike that of his fellow pre-Socratic philosophers, is with this problem that most people do not think clearly and do not understand properly, that they misinterpret what is immediately accessible and cultivate excessively idiosyncratic perspectives that do not reflect the philosophic goal: to think philosophically and rationally determine the nature of reality, the cosmos, and the human self. Rather than beginning with an account of the physical order of the universe and extrapolating an account of the nature of human knowledge, the subject of his poem proposes a radical shift in perspective, one which begins with the question of how human beings produce understanding of the essential nature of all things. In the latter fragment, and also in many other fragments, Heraclitus emphasizes in particular the resistance and frequent failure of human beings to understand the logos, even when they have heard his account of it. The placement of the word "a" always eternal, in the first sentence of the fragment is syntactically ambiguous and allows the word to perform a double duty. One interpretation of A plays an important role in the understanding of what follows. A can be understood to modify the words that precede it, to the logo, to the eontos, according to which we read the clause, people do not comprehend the logos, the one always be, the one always being. This reading refers to a presupposition readily accepted by his original audience, especially his fellow physicists. Kalle, can we put a pause there?
Absolutely.
But A can also be understood to modify the words which follow it. Axonetoi, ginotai, anthropoi, according to which we read of the logos, which is as I describe it. People are always, ever, uncomprehending. This alternative reading of A stresses the inadequacy of human understanding and implicitly raises the question of the cause of the lack of understanding. Heraclitus here exploits the syntactical characteristics of the Greek language in such a way that the sentence indicates two possible applications of A at once, that people do not comprehend the eternal logos, and that even after they hear Heraclitus's account of it, they still ever fail to comprehend properly. As with the ambiguous use of logos, the use of ae in the opening sentence implicitly presupposes two areas of inquiry: the nature of the eternal logos and the eternally problematic nature of human understanding. It is also clear from the outset that, despite the heavy element of critique, Heraclitus does believe that humans are capable of comprehending the nature of the cosmos more accurately and rationally than they generally do. As Kirk has written, the keynote of the fragment as a whole is that the logos can be apprehended, though most men ignore it. The proposition that immediately follow this first sentence of the poem imply that an improved understanding of the actual system of the cosmos is possible. For example, Heraclitus uses the word axonetoi, apeirisoi, to describe those hearing his words about the logos, translated here as uncomprehending. The adjective axonetoi is typically translated as void of understanding or stupid. The word comes from the verb suniheimi, which is radical, in its radical sense means to bring or set together. And in its metaphorical sense, it means to perceive or to hear. And at the further metaphorical remove, to understand. with the prefix a, here expressing lack or absence, the adjective axonetos suggests that people literally fail to set things together properly. Given weight to the literal imagery of Heraclitian diction, reiterates the etymological force of logos and legein. That choices are made and actions are taken in the acquisition of understanding, and that all things, panda, could be set together differently and more correctly. This first assertion, that humans do not put together empirical or theoretical information accurately, even though they have sufficient information, suggests that there are strong forces working against such accuracy, and raises the question of what those forces are. Secondly, the use of apeiros brings with it a powerful resonant field of etymological reference that helps describe Heraclitus' sense of the structural aspects of the epistemological method. Here too, the literal etymological derivation of his diction illustrates both the problem and the solution to the phenomenon he critiques. Apeiros, meaning both without trial or experience of a thing, ignorant, and also without limit, boundless, infinite, inextricable. These two meanings for the same word, which may at first seem unrelated, belong to a family of cognates related to the verbs peraia, perao, and the nouns peras and puros. The verb peraio means to attempt, to make proof of a thing, a trial of one's strength, to examine into a thing. Perao, in a similar vein, means to pass across, to penetrate. Both of these words posit a notion of a limit or a boundary, peras, that is crossed over. The related noun, poros, is a means of passing, a passageway, a means of achieving, and also a contrivance or device that enables the passage. The adverbial and adjectival forms of this root, pera and peraios, refer specifically to the other side. In the context of the fragment, the literal etymological resonance of apeiros brings with it a conception of human understanding as a process by which human beings produce a means of crossing over from apprehension to comprehension, to compound, I would say. His diction in this passage suggests that human understanding is produced by some kind of organizing insight, enabled by articulation and articulating of a definition, such as it brings understanding through or past an initial ground of apprehension into a conceptual and linguistic structure which then becomes the ground of comprehension and philosophizing, along with his use of axonotoi, when Heraclitus writes that they are like inexperienced, apeiroisi, when they are experiencing, peironemenoi, these words and deeds, end of quote. He is bringing attention to an unnecessary degree of ignorance on the part of thinking people, as well as a lack of sufficient thoughtfulness about their own epistemological method. That is to say, even though they are experiencing, it is as if they are not experiencing, because they are not setting things together properly. Because Heraclitus views the movement from experience to understanding as neither direct nor immediate, but, listen now, indirect and mediated by a setting together and by an attempt. His approach for understanding this movement from experience of cosmic phenomena to more accurate understanding of it requires a conscious acknowledgement of the means by which understanding is produced. Thirdly, in the last sentence of the poem, he broadens the portrayal of his critique of human understanding by describing both a failure to discern things as they are, lathane, and the act of forgetting, epilanthanutai. Kant's more idiomatic translation makes clear the effect of Heraclitus's analogical figure of thought. But other men are oblivious of what they do awake, just as they are forgetful of what they do asleep. Such diction suggests not only a lack of rigor and care in their attention to how and what they are thinking, how very good, but in analogizing lack of understanding to forgetfulness. Heraclitus implies that people once know, or could have known, and could remember or reconstruct the process and structure of their thinking, something they have forgotten to take into consideration, just as the sleeper doesn't know what he does while asleep. For Heraclitus, the typical thinker is metaphorically asleep when comprehending the cosmic logos. A close reading of the diction in this passage reveals Heraclitus' implicit argument that what is forgotten is precisely just how one has arrived at one's basis for judgment, how one has come to know things with certainty. And I would say here, my conclusion is that we have forgotten our way of understanding, well, just as he say, and that there are different modes. And this is the different modes and their effect. It is a bit like we are being myopic. We are just looking at these things. This is different from that. That is different from that. That is different from that. We don't see that our ways of understandings, our modes, our Stimmung, are actually different. And that is a big part of why they look different. I take help of the Necker cube here because it gives different. But we usually are not aware of what it is within me that makes it different. And that is indeed the very method of understanding. And that thing is what we are asleep about. And how do we do conclusions if we are asleep? Well, we do them in an automated forgetfulness manner. We are not really aware. And therefore, we lose out on understanding. We get only a part, and I would guess, since Heraclitus used the word cosmological order, or the order of the cosmos, he will not be happy with just a little part. Any understanding that doesn't disclose everything is not an understanding. It's a mistake in itself to mistaken the objects, taking them for all of reality, when they are always connected to different ways of understanding. We have sort of forgotten our faculty, and by doing that, we don't have any handle, we don't have any skill of it. Because of the tendency in the human condition to underestimate the importance of rigorous philosophical inquiry, and because of the great import of what is at stake, Heraclitus frequently emphasizes the great care and thoughtfulness that must attend philosophical inquiry for its accuracy to be optimized. We find another claim about the sleepy self-consciousness of human thought in D75, a sentence from Marcus Aurelius, whose paraphrase of Heraclitus contains the admonition that the producers of what happens are unaware of what they do. D75. Those who are asleep, I think Heraclitus calls laborers and co-producers of what happens in the universe. So they still partake, but by being unaware of their faculties of understanding, by doing things in the wrong order, maybe you could say they do it in the wrong temporal as well as spatial order, they make a mistake. The repetition of the metaphor of being asleep, along with our appreciation of the etymology of logos, might suggest that the work being accomplished by the laborers and the co-producers has to do with the production of the account of nature of things. But we can also get help from other propositions such as D10, in which the term synapsis, literally things taken together, variously translated as graspings, conjunctions, and assemblages, refers to the articulation of definitions with an emphasis on the active creative nature of taking together. Here's the site. Translated O'Connor. Grasping wholes and not wholes, convergent, divergent, consonant, dissonant, from all things one, and from one thing all. It all stems from one part, and not taking the mode of understanding in. Then we can't really understand the bigger picture. We cannot access the source. It is like, you can even say we choose to live in the Platonic cave. We have to deal only with shadows, because what are those without this? These are actually shadows, weakened things. Neither showing plurality, neither showing singularity, not being able to be general, neither being able to be distinct. And in the hysteria that follows, we grasp those things in a manner that destroys them. This is not proper grasping. Proper grasping, proper putting together, to conjure, I would say, laying together in a way that's attentional, devised, and also with the telos, with the goal. This is what we're lacking out. And possibly you can, if you want to be analytical, you can divide them into two parts. First, not understanding that there are different understandings. And then the second one could be the forgetfulness of the whole world. But in a way, they are also one and the same thing. And here we can also say, this is the place of the hand. Laying together, laying side by side. The hand disappears when we sleep. Our hand grasps in the sleep, like I wake up in the morning or at night, grasping for my glass of water and turning it over, making my own bed wet. This is being asleep. I still interact, I still do something. I'm not 100% passive, but maybe the passiveness is the understanding vehicle, the functioning. I will just round off what Kahn said. I read this before I realized it. This next one. As Kahn has noted, the term synapsis can also specify the cognitive act of collecting together, comprehending, or summing up. Its use here reiterates the notion that the selecting or separating that occurs in making sense of the phenomena is a cognitive act that becomes a conventional paradigm for organizing knowledge. Based on its similarity with another statement by Heraclitus, E67. The syntax in this elliptical sentence suggests that the pairs of antitheses that follow the first word display particular examples of that first word. That is, a particular combination of grasping are or can be seen as both whole and not whole, depending on the context in which we comprehend them. In his commentary on D10, Robinson argues that Heraclitus is demonstrating how, by its synoptic powers, the mind can combine formal features of the real, which prima facie run counter to each other in slightly different terms. An object can be seen by the mind both from the point of view of the centripetal forces that make for its unity, and from the centrifugal forces that makes for its fragmentation into parts. Oddly enough, this thing cannot be a whole. If this is forgotten, everything becomes not wholeness, not unwhole, it becomes not understanding. A new understanding of what is fragmented, because that is literally fragmentization. It's nothing whole here anymore. It's just different angles. And we get this observed world of different things everywhere. Now it looks like that, now it looks like that, now it looks like that, now it looks like that. That is fragmentization. Kalle, you want to add some words and I set myself?
Make yourself comfortable. You gave me an excellent idea. So we have a problem. So Ian McGilchrist, he emphasizes Heraclitus' importance because of the right side of the brain. That is, Heraclitus would be a philosopher who takes in the both opposites and so forth. He, so to say, embraces the opposites and lets them live and so forth. But we have a problem. It seems that Heraclitus is against the senses. And we know that we need our senses. Heraclitus is not a Platonic philosopher who places the real life up there somewhere. So we have a problem. So how to resolve this problem? Is Heraclitus against senses, so to say, our 5 senses or 6 senses, how you count them? And I would say that, and all the specialists on Heraclitus, they say that he was against senses. They say that Heraclitus, he is a great rationalist philosopher. Even Charles Gunn, he says that. But the problem is that, okay, so in this phrase, I could show it. I think it's a very interesting. And
don't forget to put the focus on the text. So
yes, yes. So you have, okay, I think this is cool. So Heidegger, he said, that is Heraclitus, he said that opinion, or you can also say thought, that the opinion is that is the common opinion, or the common thought, is a holy disease, and that sight deceives. So in this phrase, you could say that the common opinion is like the common thought, because it also means thought. Therefore, Heraclitus is he warns us both against thought and the sight. So it's like 50-50. So you cannot say that he's against the senses. If you say so, okay, but then you have to say he's also against thought, rationalist thought.
Yeah.
It's unfair to say that he's.
Yes,
you get. And another problem. I don't know if this makes about at the and this sight. This is a word, and the sight deceives. But if you take in this sense that that it depends on angles. And so it's not that he's saying that eyesight, we cannot trust on eyesight. It's more that it depends on the angle. We should just suppose this with this phrase: nature likes to hide. Nature loves to hide.
Yeah.
Heraclitus is not saying that. He's not saying something bad. So if the nature loves to hide, then okay, also the eyesight likes to hide and play. And it's interesting, nobody has commented that this pseudostyle deceive also has both an active, can have both an active and passive sense. I don't know if it changes any meaning, but it would mean that, okay, and the eyesight deceives, or you deceive, that is, and you deceive, an appearance deceives. So, okay, you can take a passive in process, but it could also have an appearance deceives. So it's not necessarily your eyesight that deceives. But anyhow, the point is that we should be careful when they speak about Heraclitus as a rationalistic.
Oh yeah, I do agree.
And we have to ponder on this. But anyhow,
I can see directly a point here, because if I say eyesight, well, in a way, these are all things of the eyesight. So then you can interpret Heraclitus to say, no, that's wrong. Take that away. Take eyesight away. But the thing is, it's what is before. If you get stuck on one of these and you don't realize the understanding faculty, then you're pretty bad out. It is not very. It's very bad. And he mentions, I think, in his book, Ian McGilchrist, whether it was The Master and His Emissary or The Matter Who Thinks, that the schizophrenic doesn't understand an object, because he only sees that, and that, and that. And to understand an object is actually, in 50%, something you cannot see. You can't see an object. If you say, objects are in the eyesight, it would be like this, but in the same way you can see them. Once you take this into consideration, everything opens up. Then you realize, I can see and I cannot see. All of a sudden, wow. For me it was a bit like this with Heraclitus, a big understanding, and it's just excellent. He's a good philosopher. And I absolutely agree with this. Definitely, it's not away from the senses. It is how you understand the understanding itself that makes the difference. One is standing there, one is standing there. It's not so complicated. It's just in front of your eyes. Myopia is in the case of these people making these translations, maybe, to be mean. I don't want to be mean. It's Friday. Anything more to say, Kalle?
no, I thank you for inspiring Friday.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for paying attention. Have a very beautiful weekend. Speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.